Hello. Thank you for joining us today on Martin Luther King's birthday for the CAC Teen Board program and the Youth Shall Lead, Perspectives on Art and Leadership. My name is Justine Allen. I am a junior at Benjamin Franklin High School and a member of the CAC's Teen Board. I'll be interviewing Make America What America Must Become artist Derrick-Woods Morrow, whose piece Frederick on Lake Pontchartrain and Twilight at Lincoln Beach is currently on view at the CAC. A little bit about Derrick. Utilizing childhood narratives to connect past experiences of growing up in the American South with present methods of envisioning playfulness and restoration as necessary considerations for seeing bodies, like and unlike their own, renewed. Their work explores an array of Eastern and Gulf Coast historical narratives, celebrating and achieving interactions between bodies, ideologies, and their connections to the land. Through fluidly choreographed moments, Black queer bodies inhabit their work, developing methods for experiencing a new American terrain, one that is playful and forgiving.
Thank you for the introduction, Justine. I'm happy to be here. My name is Derrick-Woods Morrow, and I think I'm going to answer a few questions. I'm excited to talk about my work and probably more nervous than Justine is, so it'll be great.
I don't think that's possible. Thanks for being here with us today. I'm really excited to talk. To you about your art. I think it's very interesting, legitimately. So, firstly, I'm really curious. What led you to make the pieces that are on display at the CAC?
I constantly feel like there's a gap, like in visual culture, for representing some of the ideas I have around just existing as Black and being able to like play or embody some type of ease or repose. And so I came down to New Orleans, like I do commonly. I've been here the last 3 or 4 years. Just spend time and meet people and sort of play or spitball ideas. I'm down here again making work about this. And I'm just interested in what can happen sort of magically if people can spend time together. So, a lot of the work might end up as a photograph, it might end as a performance or a sculpture, but they really do begin as personal investigations with Black and queer folks throughout the South, and just getting to know each other or creating like intimate space for each other. I have questions of transaction and mutual exchange, and mutual aid, and how we can sort of locate community with each other through sex and also sexuality, identity, and just, being Black. I'm very excited to return to the South. I grew up in rural North Carolina, and I kind of like slowly moved north and came out as a queer person north. I was a college athlete and was closeted, and a lot of my queerness and understanding of it happened in a very white world. And so my relationship to Black sexuality and Black queerness felt truncated. And so a lot of the images are about my return to the South and me locating a self, but also locating other people like me.
Like, I also learned a lot about just LGBT matters in queer culture from a very like white perspective. It's very difficult to find like people like me who are also like.
I think one of the saddest moments for me was realizing that I had missed something. I mean, my second film, which is titled Much Handled Things Are Always Soft, is a quote from Toni Morrison, Sula, but a meditation on oftentimes, or the often missed conversation, intergenerational conversations with Black men, queer Black men, and in the relationship to that gap, and the AIDS crisis. And I feel like one of the things I'm missing is like hot Black daddies who I can like commune with and who can tell me like a history, because so many of those people were lost to the AIDS crisis and we don't even talk about that, right? And so when the options are oftentimes that white queer space seems most welcoming of people, it it's often sad to find out how it doesn't. And how you
Yeah.
feel like there's a lack of access to um gaining more information about it. And like, I'm not only just Black and queer, I'm also Southern. Like, I grew up in like a small town outside of Greensboro, North Carolina, like Brown Summit. It's called Brown Summit, and like Confederate flags hung next to my high school, you know. And there's a way in which I definitely couldn't be Black and gay and queer and sex forward there. And so the North seems like a better place to go. And then you in that culture, and you're like, no, I got to go south. So here we are. I'm in New Orleans right now, and we're gonna make some work about like what it means. And I'm trying to find community, and it's not beautiful to hear that you also struggling through trying to build community. But I do think this is the reason I want to make work, so that, you know, your generation and my generation also have examples of how Black queer people existed in 2020, 2021, 2019, you know, and going forward. One of the things, and maybe it's not again, I say again because it's like I feel like I have this dialogue a lot and I'm really passionate about it, is that this is the reason I make work. You know, to have dialogues like this with other folks. And I know that the work isn't for everybody. There are going to be images I make like that are more sexual and that people are going to cringe at and not be able to handle. But, you know, one of my questions is like, if I make highly academic work, I make highly sex-based work, I make abstract work, I make figurative work, can all of that exist coming from a Black person in America in in the year we live in? And does it have any merit? And I think it does have merit. And I've done a lot of work on myself, and hopefully just doing research so that I can try to have this conversation better. And I'm still learning every day. So I'm still meeting people who blow my mind. And I'm trying to just leave my life open to be mind blown.
Yeah. Okay, well, while we're on the topic of just speaking to other people and meeting other groups, what advice would you have for teen artists who are also looking for that community or just figuring out themselves as well to sort of lead?
I think leadership roles in something like this don't have like a structure or like a matrix for how it's done. Um, I would say allow yourself to build the thing that you want to see in the world, because I feel like in general the world doesn't have as many apparatuses for working through developing questions of queer leadership, or what, you know, I said all the time, I had a sexuality when I was 3. Like, you have a sexuality now that doesn't have anything to do with sex, but you've known and lived in your body your whole life. And people would try to deny that in education and all over the world, which is crazy to me. It's insane. And I think it's necessary for you to think what you want to see in the world, or what other teens could want to see in the world, and try to develop the apparatus for it. Not because you even really have an example of what it's supposed to look like, but you have an example of what you want it to look like, because you see there's a gap and it's missing. I would say be imaginative and don't cut yourself short. Don't let the world structure tell you that it's impossible because you don't see an example of it. You can still make things, and you can also be imaginative. And I think if you start doing community building from that standpoint, you'll probably have a better opportunity to actually develop something that matters to begin with. Because if it's already sort of been, or it's already has a structure to it, and you can tell that it's not working because it hasn't been built yet, then they're not using the right type of language for y'all.
Okay.
What do you,
Yeah.
here's a question, like, what would you like to see more of in the world?
Oh, that is a hard one.
There's probably so many things, right? It's like a lot of
Yeah.
things you'd like to see happen in the world, you know?
Yeah. Just, I don't know, climate change, everything.
And I think New Orleans is trying hard to do a job of supporting the arts, I believe. I know that there's an organization called Studio in the Woods, and if you don't know about it, you should definitely reach out to those folks, because they're on the track to develop conversations around climate change. And I think they're very POC queer forward also as an art residency. So maybe a teen program could partner with Studio in the Woods and develop some type of program to really, think about queerness and climate change at the same time.
That is, wow, I didn't even know that area existed. That is so cool. I'm sorry, I sound like a broken record, but I'm just learning a lot today.
And don't also, I say this from the heart, like there's so many things I don't know. Like, never feel obligated to know everything. You're not, and I'm not ever gonna know everything. I'm just not. I can try to read, but after a certain amount of books, I'm gonna lose some of that knowledge, So even then, and so I think maybe one of the things I've tried to develop in my dialogues with people is to just release some of the tension, and like less is at stake. Like even in this space with me and you, like we can laugh and we can joke, and like that's how the interview should be. You don't feel obligated. You can ask me whatever questions you have, but like don't feel obligated. If something pops up you want to know, then just ask.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, this is like kind of off topic, kind of not, just while we're talking about that more, like while we're on the topic of what do you want to see happen and what do you want to see created, do you think that art can have an effect on just on like more than personal identity and more of like if art could have a role in the democratic process as well, just going beyond personal identity and more to not politics but political things, if that makes sense?
I think from many angles we can look at art as a technology. It's like a language that you use, and it's like a method for creating something. And I think it does have the ability to create discourse around topics that are political. I think also we don't often think about like the how technology operates as like a prosthetic, maybe literally, and also maybe literally and figuratively. I'm trying to think on both sides of this, but when someone creates the technology to make literally like a prosthetic leg, that's art. That is a sculpture, and it also has a utility. So there is something very literal about being able to create an object that can better humanity. Then there's also the ability to create images in society. Maybe someone takes a figure or takes a picture, sorry, of that person wearing that prosthetic. Then an image can be captivating, and it can explain to people what ableism is, and explain to people what disability really is. And then we can start abstracting what disabilities are, how PTSD can affect other people, than just the people we think it is affecting. And so I do think it's all interconnected, in the languages that we're using that oftentimes aren't attributed to art, also to me are art. To me, just having dialogue is art. It's a type of performance. We go out every day. I always like to say, and it's probably cheesy at this point, but it's all drag. It is all drag. Like we're all wearing clothes that suggest something about us. I'm wearing sweatpants, so people think I'm an athlete. I've got a hat on, and people think this or that. And so we're all sort of in constant modes of looking at the world through images. And I do think that they suggest things. Like some days I dress more queer than other days, and those are political statements, and that is a performance. And I think that also is art. And I guess I'm rambling a little bit, but anything can and will be art if you want it to be art, and you have the power to say what is art, and what you believe is good art. And I definitely think it has the ability to change minds, or to give a better representation of something, or to very directly affect politics. I can think of a host of artists, Andrea Serrano, who is currently like collecting Trump memorabilia and exhibiting it in galleries. If you look at the work of like Alfredo Jar, I always bring this artist Clifford Prince King up. Clifford's a friend and makes gorgeous photographs of Black people just existing, Black queer folks existing indoors, outdoors, touching, spending time together, hugging, and they're gorgeous. I mean, just gorgeous photographs. And I think if more people saw those photographs more and more often, it would normalize that behavior. which sometimes seems to be lacking, yet we know it exists. And so I do think that representation matters.
I've never heard of art defined as that, as that art can be sort of anything, you know? I've always heard of art's always been its own sort of separate field, you know? Like you don't think of art and math in the same area. Or calling creative writing art is somewhat controversial, you know?
I
So,
was speaking with someone recently. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
no.
Who's mostly in math. They're like a financial person, and he was explaining to me why he didn't become a mathematician, because he said he didn't have a romance around aesthetics. And I didn't know this, but apparently math equations are meant to be aesthetically pleasing to the eye. And so
Oh, that is so
mathematicians
cool.
tried to make pretty equations. And that blew my mind, right? Because I didn't think of math that way. But that's art, right? Like that's art. Like to design or to curate an image of something to have an aesthetic is art.
Oh, that is so cool. Almost in like the same vein as like when people talk about the golden ratio in art. Or I don't have it memorized, but how people are always like things we find most aesthetically pleasing have this sort of mathy thing to them. That is so cool. I didn't know that. I need to change
I didn't
career
know
path.
I didn't know that either till like 2 weeks ago. So
Okay, this is completely out of left field, but since we are talking on Martin Luther King Day, I feel like this question just should be asked in general and of like, what does Martin Luther King Day sort of mean to you, like as a Black queer person, or as an artist, as everything?
it's hard to respond to that. I
Yeah.
think a lot of people still don't know, how radical Martin Luther King was. They also don't know like how much of an imperfect figure MLK was. In many ways, the tenets of his teachings, for me, have taught me that I don't have to be perfect, that I can be great. And there can be things that aren't perfect about me. I mean, MLK, I'm trying not to do the sugarcoating thing, because and also Black people also, I think, oftentimes struggle when people have a negative opinion of MLK, but I have a very positive opinion of MLK. I just think that some of the things that we hide about his past, and that we don't talk about, same with Malcolm, like should be talked about and they should be celebrated. I think trying to make Black people into a monolith, like, is what I think about on MLK Day. Like, I don't have to be a representation for everybody. And like, I'm allowed to have flaws. I'm allowed to have mistakes, still be respected, still be loved, still be cared about, and like exist in the world as the person I am today. Right. And I kind of want that for everybody, to have to consider that like your imperfections are really like human. And that especially for Black people, I really want Black people to realize that you don't have to be the things that society tells you have to be. Like, Martin Luther King is not the only person who uh, is given space for that. But like, when you think that like Rustin is who actually wrote that speech, or wrote many of those speeches, right? A queer Black man, like what James Baldwin has done for society, Audre Lorde, Toni Morrison, Octavia Butler, Bell Hooks. Like, I could keep giving names of people who are orators and authors and people who oftentimes people don't talk about, that have been influenced, and like Coretta Scott King influenced Martin Luther King, and another thing will be community. Like, MLK for me is community. Like, when I think about the people who are influenced and influenced him, Black people, brown people, POCs in the world, it makes me really think about the collective. I think about queer kin a lot. Like, who are queer kin? Who are your queer family members, our chosen family members? So many people have different names than they were given as children, because their families don't accept them, but they found other Black and queer folks to call family. MLK to me is a lot about that too.
That was a hard question. You tackled it so well.
I
I've
don't
never heard
I
of
don't know if
people
that's
sort of
true. I feel like
embracing him.
sorry. Go ahead.
No, I think I lost my train of thought. I've just never heard of people sort of You always hear about people talking about Martin Luther King as a very perfect figure and what we should all aspire to be. I've never heard of someone talking about him as a flawed human and then embracing the fact that he was flawed. You know, almost feels like blasphemous feels like the right word to say. You know.
People, I think there's so much gray area. We live in a very binary society, right? Where people have to be like white or black or right or wrong. And I try not to look at the world in that way. I think there are just multiple ways for accessing a thing. And like generally there's a majority who believe something is good and they're bad. And then there are like minority majorities. And then, there are like multiple levels to the majority, depending on what part of society. So it's all really intersectional. There's a lot of things happening in humanity, in being a human and having personhood. And what we do, I think, as a society, which is not helpful to actually allowing people to grow or to change or to develop, is situate them as one thing. That's why you have to be gay or straight. There are like no bi people. Of course there are bi people. Of course there are pan people. Of course there are just people who don't fall into this stream of conscious of how people have decided that what the general public believes is how we should exist. And when we get into the nitty gritty, I'm sure like we all have secrets and we all have things that also make us really beautiful and really great. Um, and those are important to champion and to also not forget the flaws that we have, but to also remember that like this is what being a person and a human is.
Hey, hello, my name is Renee Angerer. I'm a senior at St. Martin's Episcopal School, and I'm a member of the CAC's Teen Board. I'll be interviewing Make America What America Must Become artist, Caroline Sinders. A little about Caroline. Caroline Sinders is a machine learning researcher and artist obsessed with language, culture, and images. Her works explore the intersections between technology, trauma, and society, and looks at AI and online networked conventional spaces. Her work has been featured in the Victoria and Albert Museum, Tate's Modern Tate's Exchange, MoMA PS1, the Modern Art Museum of Bologna, Art Electronica, as well as others. She is the founder of Convocation Design and Research, an agency focusing on the use of machine learning and design for public good. So, what made you decide to go and look at AI, and how did you figure out that it was biased?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Thank you for asking. I've always been interested in technology ever since I was in high school. I just didn't really know what kind of jobs you could do with technology. Like I was in high school in the really, really early 2000s, and I was in a religious school in Texas. We had moved to Texas when I was in middle school. So I was always interested in how do you design community spaces within technology, within social networks. And when I say like this was a really long time ago, I joined Facebook, I think when I was a senior or junior in high school, and Facebook had just let people who were not in college join. So like Facebook used to just be for college students. So I was always really interested in how people are like changing or creating new styles of communication. I ended up studying photojournalism and photography in undergrad, and then I ended up getting a master's in design and technology. And when I was in my master's program, I got more and more interested in how do we look at different kinds of language that's starting to come into creation. So the way different groups online will form different kinds of in-speak, which is similar to how groups offline form different kinds of language. But I was also interested in how people study that networked language. So anything online is a form of data. Anything we post or say is stored or saved somewhere, and there's different kinds of metadata attached to it. And so that data can all be grouped together and then fed into different machines to study effectively. So, this is where people will scrape Twitter for a bunch of tweets on a certain day or around a certain topic. and then they'll look at the metadata associated with it. So that can be, different locations, that can be looking at the actual content itself, so looking at the structure of sentences, or trying to look at like tone or emotion that exists in those sentences. So I was interested in how do people study language online? And then what are the failure states that pop up within that? So how does this study of online communication create at times bias or misinterpretations of what is actually happening? And so bias can exist in a variety of different ways. It can exist from the technology making assumptions about people, or rather having an inability to read different kinds of people. So that's often what we see right now with artificial intelligence is artificial intelligence systems that use something called computer vision, which is kind of what it sounds like, the machine trying to see the world. That sort of like seeing and analyzing of the world, there's a lot of issues within that because the computer vision technology has a hard time deciphering different races and different gender. It has an easier time sort of recognizing like white skin and the male gender. So if those are overlapping, it's generally like white males. So even if you're like white and femme presenting, it'll have a harder time recognizing you. So these are assumptions that the technology makes. And I'm interested in those assumptions, especially when it comes to conversational language. So the area I also specifically look at is online harassment and harm. A lot of online harassment can be super contextual to the victim, meaning the harassment can be coordinated or descriptive of personal experiences the victim has that may not immediately read as harmful. So let's say you and I had never met and I said, "You look really nice in that burgundy sweatshirt." If you received that from a stranger, that would be really jarring because you're wearing a burgundy sweatshirt right now. How would they know that, right? That feels like an invasion of privacy. It can make you feel like you're being surveilled. So that is like a form of what we could call innocuous harm, where a system wouldn't recognize the sentence of "that's a really nice burgundy sweatshirt" as harmful because it's really contextually based. So that's a lot of what I'm interested in is what are the mistakes that these machines make and how does that impact society and all different parts of society, different kinds of groups within society.
Do you think it's fixable? Like, do you think we can train AI to not do that?
That's such a good question. I think it's not fixable and it is fixable. So I don't know if we can necessarily make technology so accurate that it understands the context of harm, but I think we can train people to understand that context of harm. So I'm a millennial. I'm from a different generational group than perhaps you are. You're probably in Generation Z, right? And the kinds of conversations like your generation is having is so amazing, and they're a little different than the conversations my generation is having. And your generation is sort of building off of conversations previous generations have had. So the introduction of pronouns and a variety of pronouns, the fact that that doesn't have to be fought for, it's just considered established. That's what I mean by this building off of. So I believe that like society can build scaffolding to tackle things like bias, and that society will update itself. And through pushes in society, through things like protest or research, or the insistence of safer spaces, the insistence of like centering marginalized groups and creating protections around that those are the kinds of patches and fixes we need in society. And software can follow that. But I don't think that software will fix society. I think software can help extend society to new places that it can go. But a lot of these problems are human problems, and they're things we have to address first with people. Because society, or rather technology, is a mirror to society. So all of the injustice we have that exists right now in our communities, technology is just a mirror to that. It's just showing back to us what we already have. So we can't fix technology until we fix ourselves.
So what do you think the role of art is in that process of fixing our society?
That's also such a good question. You came with such amazing questions. Thank you. I am a big proponent of what I call critical design, or rather this methodology called critical design. I did not make this up, but it was championed by Anthony Doon and Fiona Raby in the 1990s. Critical design is an artistic exploration of design as a medium. So in Europe, there is a lot of really interesting research work that goes into the practice of design. In the United States, we tend to view design as this very useful and almost capitalist-based thing. When we talk about design, what we end up talking about is things for sale or things that aid product, software that aid companies. But in Europe, where I'm based part out of the year, so I'm based between New Orleans and Germany, there's already been a very deep conversation around how design can be this incredibly artistic and experimental practice, and critical design is a part of that. Critical design is the design concept that you remove capitalism from design. And so what do you have left? What you have left actually is this really great toolkit of creating new imaginaries for what society could look like. This is similar to another form of design called speculative design, just sort of what it sounds like. It's speculating on near and far futures and imaginaries. So I like to play with concepts of usefulness and utilitarianism in my work, meaning how do you build sort of useful things? But my work is around examining the ideas of usefulness in an artistic setting to push people to think of, well, what could things look like? So what could equity-based technology be? What does it need to have to exist? So I think art really provides this almost like necessary metaphor or translation or even Trojan horse of trying to get policy software and general society to understand what could be, like what we could actually have and what it could look like when we talk about creating with technology. So that's what I like. That's what I love about a tech-based arts practice that is rooted in critical design.
So do you think there's a difference between like digital art and technology-based art? Because
I think, oh, sorry.
I
No, go
have
ahead.
a friend who's doing a lot of like digital artwork, and so
I mean, I think they're kind of similar. They all share an umbrella. So like I have a lot of friends that are net artists. So like net art is a form of digital media art that is examining like playfully or critically the internet and how we sort of exist online. So that can be like GIF-based art. So all of that is sort of rooted inside of tech-based art. So technology-based art can be like computational art. So art totally drawn from writing code, which can manifest through a series of different programming languages like open frameworks or processing, or even just variations of JavaScript. So that's like computational based art where you write code and then the output is the art. Other technology based art can be things where you are like with artificial intelligence training, again, which is a general adversarial network, which is what creates videos, which can create videos that look like they're melting into each other. So that is also a form of computational art. But, you know, if you're making your data set, if you're making your data set of images, if you're taking all the images yourself, right, it's, it's still a form of tech art. So they're kind of the same. It's sort of just like whichever phrase you like to use.
So then what do you think it means to be woke today?
Oh, wow. Whoa. I mean, that's a good question. As like a cis white woman, I don't think it's on me to label or use the word woke because it didn't come from white people. And I think it's also kind of a badge that a lot of white women in particular try to aim to have, just try to dispel, white feminism and white supremacy. I think we should work towards, as someone who's white, trying to confront and end variations of white supremacy. But I don't think that we should do that in lieu of what's the word? Like we shouldn't do that to garner a label of wokeness. So I think that's also probably the catch-22 is like, I think we should have like a society that is trying to end white supremacy and where people acknowledge their different forms of privilege. So acknowledging like cis privilege and white privilege. And if someone else labels you woke, that's great. I think that I like if someone were to call me that, I'd be really flattered, but it's not like a label I can affix to myself. So we should aspire, I guess, to have like woke values, but with the recognition of, even if you're working towards that, you cannot label yourself as woke. And, you should also just try to actually build an equitable society because it's something you want and it's something that other people also need too.
Okay, well, thank you so much for talking with me today. And thank you for your insights on both technology and society.
Yeah, thank you. This was a really great conversation. These were really fantastic questions.
Hello, thank you for joining us today on Martin Luther King's birthday for the CAC Teen Board program and the Youth Shall Lead, Perspectives on Art and Leadership. My name is Monica Garcia. I'm a senior at Kennedy Discovery High School and a member of the CAC's Teen Board. I'll be interviewing Make America What America Must Become artist Langston Allston, whose piece Second Line is currently on view at the CAC. A little about Langston. He is a New Orleans-based painter and muralist. Langston was born in Champaign, Illinois in 1991 and studied painting at the University of Illinois. Since leaving school, he has traveled the country researching and creating public artworks and large-scale paintings. He moved to New Orleans in 2015 and has been producing murals and installation work in the city since. Langston continues to show at galleries around the country, like the Museum of Contemporary African Diasporian Art in Brooklyn and YCA in Chicago. Thanks for being with me, Langston. I'm really curious what led you to make this specific piece. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I forget exactly what year. I think 2017 is when the piece is from, but I got given a bunch of like found leftover advertising vinyl, and I was making like a series of like really just basically giant journal pages with that vinyl material that I had, because it was like a easily accessible, really large scale canvas that didn't cost me anything to get my hands on. And so it gave me an opportunity to kind of like make work that was really about my own personal thoughts and like my internal life in a way that working on more precious material or working in like a public space doesn't really allow me to do. And I just started making these like giant journals about things I would see around the city and reflections I would have on certain experiences I would have, because I was still kind of new to New Orleans at that time, and I was experiencing a lot of things, not necessarily for the first time, but having a really like fresh perspective on a lot of things. And so it's basically just like a giant journal of like my impression of being in the second line and like kind of learning about what that was and what it meant and how it felt.
Yeah, that's really cool. So then what do you think the role of art in the democratic process is?
Man, that's a tough question. Especially today, it's been a rough January for the democratic process already.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like in this exact day and time, I think that, artists have worked hard to get our opinions and our ideas about how the world could maybe be a little better out into the world. We've worked really hard on that for the last year, I think, under some pretty astonishing circumstances. And a lot of my peers' work has been really inspiring to me to see, just to get from day to day. And I've seen a lot of people making, useful propaganda or useful public art for, I guess, affecting democratic change. But right now, it doesn't. I think that artists maybe can take a break, because it seems like the democratic process, it seems like the people who are supposed to administer the democratic process are kind of in the driver's seat now. I think that artists have like a ability to maybe influence people or teach people, or show people what a brighter world can look like, but like at the end of the day, I don't know, democratic process is looking scary.
Do you have any particular role models who inspired you to voice issues important to you?
Yeah, a lot of my favorite artists are like very politically motivated, or their work communicates political ideas in an articulate and interesting way. I think the person that I think of most is probably Emory Douglas, who is the artist for the Black Panthers. His work is just like really clear and really communicative, and I think that the way that he puts a message in the work so like vividly, and doesn't leave any room for misunderstanding the image, is really important and really good. And I think also that that was like something I was thinking about when I was making that big drawing, because as I was making it, I was wanting to explain my thinking and why I was putting certain images in there, and like why I was doing it in that way. And it ended up being like a lot of writing, but it was done initially with the intention of trying to make it more clear. I don't know if that worked, but it was, it was the goal. I also think about there's a lot of artists from the Harlem Renaissance, especially, that also communicate like big, clear political ideas, like with public art. Jacob Lawrence and Romar Bearden are two people I think about a lot in that regard. Yeah. Who else? There's so many artists that I love looking at, and there are also lots of artists who kind of inspire me to not be so two-dimensional with how I present ideas, I think, or to leave a little bit more to the imagination, like to allow the viewer to bring a little bit of their own information to the work. Like Jamie Holmes is somebody who's like, he makes like really interesting paintings that allow you to kind of transplant your own experiences and relate your own experiences to the work, and that's something that I'm definitely inspired by and would like to do more of.
Oh, that's really cool. I really did see kind of whenever you were writing all over the piece, I really liked how it focuses on each. It's kind of like a scripture, like each part has like a specific, really detailed thing that it focuses on. So I guess I can see what you meant by that a lot in that piece.
Yeah.
Well, what kind of cultural or social space do you want your work to create?
I think I would just want my work to create a space where the people who are in it feel good. I don't know. It's so easy to walk into like a museum space or an institution as like a Black person or as a person of color and feel unwelcome. And I think that as museums start to populate their walls with more Black art, people will start to feel a little bit more comfortable in those spaces. But I think ultimately, if my work is going to be seen in that context, I just want people to be able to come into it and see something that makes them feel good. I feel like there's a lot of work that is traumatic to see, even if it's or traumatic work has been overwhelmingly selected to be presented in museums by Black artists previously. And so even though I think that work is really valuable and really important, it's really not the work I want to make. I want to make work that is like, even if I'm not feeling particularly hopeful, I want to make work that is hopeful and is like empathetic.
As an artist yourself, have you seen any like change in like inclusion of people of color in museums or exhibitions throughout the years?
Yeah, it seems like this past summer has been a moment where big institutions kind of took notice of Black artists more than they had previously, and I guess that's good. It is definitely good, but it's also kind of strange because it feels very sudden. So I personally, like, as somebody who has benefited from like a level of increased visibility, am grateful, but I'm also a little bit wary that maybe this is something that big companies and museums and arts organizations are looking at as a fad, and hopefully that isn't the case. And this is like an opportunity for like real change as to how representation looks in spaces like this.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying, because I remember there was a time my aunt told me, we're from Mexico and we went to the Frida Kahlo Museum. And I remember she told me that like during the 90s, there was like no one that would ever come. And like now you go there and there's like lines all like around the house lining up for it. And I'm just thinking like what made her so like popular, what made her become, I don't know, like people now, I have a Frida Kahlo mask and people will come up to me and be like, oh my god, that's Frida Kahlo. And that never happened to me before. I guess she's become more of like a worldwide known like face. And I
Yeah.
guess it can be a good thing and a bad thing, because you know you don't want people to profit from like her culture, or like, you know, it's just like it can be scary at times, but hopefully it's just like a form of change, and a good change, rather than just, yeah, profit.
Yeah. I mean, I think the world is changing. The demographics of like the country are changing, and so ultimately, like, uh, we're gonna be represented no matter what. I think that there's like a clear, like, in the future, our representation will be like mandatory, not optional, and so I'm just hoping that that future can be now.
Last question. What important issues make you want to continue to make more art?
Honestly, I'm feeling like so overwhelmed by all the like issues I think in the world these days that my art has kind of started to gravitate away from kind of explicitly addressing those things. Um, yeah, I think of a lot of my earlier work as being like politically motivated work, or like propaganda facing work, and I would like to continue making that, but like right now I just feel so burnt out on it that like the issues I'm like kind of focusing on putting into like paintings and stuff that I'm making now are more just like how to make people feel like loved and comforted and seen, rather than trying to educate them to any one particular issue. I feel like everybody is so aware of all the problems that they're facing that there's not much utility for me as an artist to tell them what problems they're facing. And maybe I can just give them something to look at that makes them feel as though they can overcome some of those problems. I think that there's like a big, huge lane for artists to be educators, and I would like to eventually maybe head back in that direction. But right now, I kind of just need to make other kinds of work, I think.
Yeah, I think people need a lot more positive and just like uplifting work. So that's really good. Um, we're facing really rough times right now, and I feel like everybody's just like all over the media is just discussion about politics and just, I don't know. So I think where your artwork is going, I really would be really interested to see more of that, instead of just like all the time being just politics and politics. So
Yeah.
I look forward to your future as an artist and seeing more of your work. Thank you for joining us, and bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.